It's time to get sexy, so watch Secular Sexuality Live Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTSS and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callsex.
Welcome back. That's right. It's another episode of The Nonprofits, the show where we discuss news and topic of the day from a skeptical humanist perspective. I'm your conductor, Secular Rarity. And today, for this symphony of blasphemy and sinning, I have three of the coolest people out there that are going to translate my seemingly random and inarticulate cues into a beautiful piece of music. Starting all the way on the far end, Teo el Ateo, how are you?
Hola, Secular. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here as usual. I love being here, guys. I love being with you. And I've been with this team before, so I know that this is going to be an awesome show.
I agree. Up next, we have one of the hardest working men out there I know, the man who puts rock in rock and roll. It's Kelley.
Thanks. Really honored to be here with you guys. What a great group of people to work with. I'm really honored.
And finally, we have the reason that you still interrupt your friends and family at dinner time to show them the coolest video you've seen today. Genevieve, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for that intro. I'm so excited to be here.
I think it's going to be a really, really cool show today for sure. And for everybody out there who isn't aware, The Nonprofits is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the separation of church, religion, and government, and promoting positive atheism. We have some really interesting stuff today. We're going to talk about some evangelicalism in football down in Brazil. We have a Saudi blogger, Raif Badawi, finally being freed from prison. A new poll that seems to say that the Americans up here in the United States, we may like that Christ, but not so much those Christians. And then last but not least, to round it off, we're going to talk about some of the happiest nations on earth and how they're mostly secular. And of course, as with all the shows, the links to today's topics and the news we discuss, well, you can find them down below in the description. But if you want to come prepared, if you want to be the top of the class, check out that Nonprofits fan-run Facebook page every Friday night so you can see a list of the articles ahead of time. And to start us off, I think we've got the cutest sentient cartoon in the game. Teo, is that right?
You are totally right. Cutest, sexiest, hottest. Yeah, thank you for that humble introduction, Secular. And yeah, I know I am the Latino guy, so I should know a lot about the topic that we're going to talk about. But guys, shamefully for my family, I don't like soccer. Yes, boo, I know. So this is all news for me. But apparently in Brazil, during soccer games, there is a kind of preaching amongst players. And 1 second, the name of the guy was João. I wanted to say Leite, but I was corrected. He's João Leche. And he believed that he has a mission assigned to him by Jesus Christ to spread God's word among other football players. So this started in December 1982 when this guy decided to randomly approach an opponent before the game started, and he said, "Jesus loves you, and I have a gift for you." And he just gave him a Bible. And this story, or this is how the article starts, please check it in the description. It's a BBC article, very interesting one. And in order to explain why I am not surprised about this, I have to tell you a little bit about Brazil. Brazil is a very, I don't want to say extremely religious place, but it's a very religious country. I'm sure that you have heard about Bolsonaro. He is a guy who uses a lot of religious talk during his speech, and that's why he was chosen the president of the country. Oh, it's terrible. And over there, they have something called mega churches. These churches are huge, but I mean huge. Please Google them, search for some pictures about them. You will see that they are bigger than the biggest mall that you can imagine in the USA. They are so big that they have been spreading to the USA, to some countries in Africa. So, where am I going with this? That Brazil itself is very religious, and religion is very important over there. And the second thing that is almost a religion for them, that is extremely powerful, is soccer. So I am not surprised that both things have been joined into this weird mixture, where this guy Leche, he's just giving Bibles away, in trying to indoctrinate other soccer players into their religion. It all begins with a Formula One driver who started competing with "Jesus saves" slogans in his cars. So this guy decided to do the same with Chris saves on his shirt. But the Brazilian Football Association banned that behavior and threatened he and his team with points deduction. So for him, that obviously was almost persecution, and it was very, very hard for him, a very hard moment in his life. But what would you know? Now he's being very successful, and there is a whole movement that is gaining more and more strength nowadays. I know that, you had a lot to talk about this, right?
Yeah, I mean, this article and this whole story is so interesting because it kind of covers that intersection of sports and how it relates to culture and how that influences politics and religion, and it's all sort of wrapped up in this bubble of that classic Christian persecution complex. I mean, first of all, I think it was kind of absurd that he described a very difficult time for him, being when he was just told that he couldn't, deface his uniform with his own personal religious beliefs. But of course, when you're an evangelical Christian, then not being able to openly share your religious beliefs everywhere, even with a third party, like non religious organization involved in sort of promoting it, that in and of itself is persecution. Um, I think that the big problem is that these beliefs that should be personal to people are inherently not once you're an evangelical. And it's so interesting because I believe that this whole story kind of started in the 80s and the 90s. And then you take it to where we are today, where you're right, Brazil has, soccer is a very, very important part of their culture. And so naturally, I feel like this whole movement had to have something to do with where we are today, where Brazil has a large evangelical population who mostly voted for Bolsonaro, who, I don't know if I'm allowed to share my personal political beliefs here, but I personally, not speaking for the ACA, believe that he's kind of a tyrant and a moron. So, surprise, surprise. Quite a few parallels there in Brazil with what we've seen here in this nation.
For sure. And
What are
Kelley,
your
you had
thoughts?
Kelley, you had something kind of interesting you had pointed out right before the show started. What did you find?
Well, I'm with you, Teo. I'm not a big soccer football fan, but I found a lot of things in the article interesting. And one Genevieve brought up was this superiority, and then on the opposite side, this persecution complex that many Christians have. And it's so illustrated in this story where the players going out on the field and handed Bibles out to members of the other team. And when they won the first championship, saying that they knew they were going to win because God would never lose to somebody who believes in Buddha, because the goalkeeper on the other team was a Buddhist. And then that's where you get that superiority thing. And then that persecution happens when they were collecting the championship. They were told they couldn't wear evangelical T-shirts with evangelical sayings on them. So they decided to drape them over their shoulder because the rules don't apply to them because Jesus is on their side, right? And I just saw that it was really illustrative, and I thought it was funny that since they became more evangelical with the team, that they've pushed this, even not letting better players join the team because they weren't religious enough, is that they did win a World Cup 8 years later, but they haven't won one since, and they're still working off this, making the evangelical part of the team more important than the skill part. So I think maybe they might want to reconsider that, and maybe if they want to win another World Cup, is to start getting people who can actually play instead of that believe in Jesus.
Yeah, I thought it was a really, really cool kind of journey with this small group of people that started this out, so long ago. And yeah, I mean, it said at one of the games at the end, there were 4 people, that got together and prayed. And by the time, we had finished that paragraph, they were saying a few years later, and it's practically the whole team. I mean, it was really, really interesting to see, I mean, how much power they got so quick. And I guess one of the things that always jumps out to me in these instances is when any particular ideology gains control, what do they do with that power? And I think it kind of seems like we all of us here kind of felt like they weren't exactly going the right route with that. What do y'all think?
Definitely.
Yeah, no,
And as it bled over into their politics, as Genevieve mentioned, it also didn't work out for the Brazilian economy either. So
Good point.
I
for me,
think
it's creepy. It's terrible because sorry, Jean. I
no,
just
no.
wanted to say that it's terrible because religion controlling economy and other teams and things that they shouldn't. It scares me.
Yeah. And as we'll cover in our 4th segment, it doesn't always work out the best. But I was just going to say that something that many people find beautiful about sports is that it is kind of this cultural unifier where it doesn't really matter what your religion or your race or your socioeconomic status is. If you're from a place, you root for your team, and it's sort of this nice sort of break from all of the other various strifes that we have in daily life. It's a really nice reprieve, and it's so funny that they're sort of ruining that in a sense, not letting people on their team because they don't believe in the same religion. I'm sorry. That's I myself am not a huge soccer fan either. But that feels like kind of a blow, especially for that sport, which for so many nations, it is sort of this universal national pastime. You might play soccer with people who speak 20 different languages, but you all speak the language of the game. I don't know why you need to, inject this sort of, ironically, like this persecution that they were complaining about themselves.
And you brought up something that was really interesting, and it sparked a thought in my head, because initially at the beginning of the article, there was a whole discussion. I believe it was how the Dutch national team contacted FIFA or the Olympics and had complained about one of the Brazilian players, kind of making this statement of faith. I mean, sure, they're private institutions, they set their own rules, yada yada, but what do y'all think? Teo, do you think it's right that in these types of places we try to keep it as secular as possible, or should we allow everybody to kind of show up their religious flag or do their religious ritual at the end?
No, all the opposite. For me, sorry, G, but soccer divides people a lot in their different teams. They start wars amongst them sometimes. So I don't know if they really unify that much. And after you
Very
have
true.
that division already, adding your personal life, because religion should be personal. You shouldn't be talking about your religion everywhere, and your personal life shouldn't be part of either if you get hired for the team or not, if you get chosen for the team or not. So no, religion sorry, religion should be personal. You should keep that to yourself, and you shouldn't try to impose it on other people. That what I feel that this guy is doing when he goes to the team and gives them a Bible and tries to talk about their Lord and Savior Jesus. That is trying to impose your religion onto others, and I consider that totally wrong.
Yeah. Kelley, what are your thoughts?
I'm thinking that religion mixed with football is probably a really bad recipe. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. I totally agree with everybody, though. Bringing some religion into a place like this is really not the thing to do, because we already have these divisions because I'm rooting for the home team, and adding religion into that just isn't going to make anything better.
Now, I thought, it was really interesting at the end when they focused on Paulino and how after he had scored a goal in last year's Olympics, that he made kind of this archer pose in reference to his spirit deity, Ushasi. And this is kind of a mixture of a handful of different cultures and religions of something called candomblé, and it's practiced in Brazil. What do you think about kind of taking that moment to have a stance and push back just a little bit against the overarching power of the evangelical church in this instance, Genevieve?
I mean, I personally, I just think that there are so many instances for athletes where they're obviously going to express their religious beliefs in one way or another. And I think that's perfectly fine. I mean, if you believe in Jesus or in another deity and you score a goal and, you say a prayer, you look up to the sky, like, why would I go so far as to restrict that? My big issue here was specifically with the spreading of the Bibles and sort of giving people trouble if they're not your brand of Christianity.
Yeah.
Um, but I think we need to allow athletes and players to have the freedom to express themselves, especially because if you've ever played really intense sports, I mean, a lot of time, I mean, you're putting your all in it. You should be able to sort of off the cuff celebrate in a way that is appropriate to you and your own spirituality. I just like I think that athletes should be able to use their platforms to protest if they see fit. That's not the same thing as passing out literature and demonizing people who don't join them.
Good point.
Yep, I actually agree with that. I mean, yeah, if you want to celebrate your own way, go ahead, do it. Just don't impose this to others and don't, discriminate. Oh, this guy is not playing with us because whatever, because he has a tattoo and the Bible forbids it. I I just guess, well, I don't know if you have the same over there, but in here we say that we never talk about politics, soccer, or religion because those always divide. And Brazil is this strange mixture of the three of them together into one that, ooh, I wouldn't want to be there talking about those issues because it must be intense. I know that in Argentina, for example, soccer divides whole cities, whole regions inside a city. I don't want to even imagine how that is in Brazil. And once again, creepy. And yeah, we shouldn't mix them. But I do agree with G that if they want to express something personal, as long as they don't try to impose that onto others, I could agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's where my biggest issue was. I don't have a problem with the players gathering together in the hotel room before a match or after a match or whatever and praying, but there was a piece where one of the pastors apparently wasn't even supposed to be on the premises and still came in and did a whole ceremony and laying on hands and stuff. And it was a long time, so much so that they even ended up firing the head security guard or something. And I just feel like, religion or not, but gosh darn it, it does seem to always happen when religion's involved. When we're pushing those boundaries for one group of people and we're breaking the rules for one, ideology or group out there, and everybody else is, getting shafted, I never feel good about that. And that was definitely something that was coming through. It seemed to me by the time we got to the end of the article, there was a little bit of a hopefulness there, in the fact that there was a bit of a waning of the people involved. But Kelley, what do you think? Do you think it's enough to make a difference? Do you think, Brazil is finally gonna kind of see the other side of all of the things you're not supposed to talk about being together, or what?
Yeah, I don't have high hopes. I really don't, to be honest with you. Not at this point in time. And when I looked at the amount of people that had left the Catholic Church and become a part of an evangelical church over since all of this started happening with the football team, and it was like 30%. 30% of the population, and that's huge. And when I see people torn into that more toxic form of Christianity, it really doesn't give me any hope. So, unfortunately.
Genevieve, what are your thoughts?
My final thought on this, because I'm not nearly educated enough to sort of speak on the trajectory of religion in Brazil in its entirety, but at the end of the day, I can't believe that these guys think that their God cares so much about who wins a damn, soccer game. It's kind of that classic joke, right? Like, I know there's starving people dying all over the world, but please, God, let the Packers win this weekend. I mean,
Yeah.
he works in mysterious ways.
That's right. That's what it is. It's very mysterious. Teo, you want to wrap us up?
Totally mysterious. I guess G and Kelley said everything already, and so far, once again, for me it's a little bit scary to see that how powerful religion is over there. It's awful, and Brazil has a lot of poor people, and I mean a lot of poor people. And all those people go to these mega churches and they give all the money that they can give every Sunday or Saturday, depending. And it saddens me. It saddens me when you see a huge mega church surrounded by favelas, those very poor places. And that mega church was built with money that came out of those favelas, and they are extremely poor, and they have this huge building that they are praising, and it's part of their lives, and they see it as totally normal, and it's not a problem to see their religion even in their soccer games. I do believe that they should be separated, and I hope that that they can change in future. But for now, as you said, they chose Bolsonaro because he was religious, so I don't have much hope.
Hey, I'm okay with promoting the separation of religion in government and the separation of religion and sports. I mean, that seems fine with me. I don't see why we can't have it. But that wraps us up there, and we're actually going to go into something that's a little bit more hopeful, I think. But before we do that, we have to give a really, really big thank you to all of the veteran viewers out there for getting us over that 10.6 thousand subscriber mark. This is awesome, y'all. Thank you so much. And if you're out there and you haven't subscribed, well, it's really simple. There's a button down below. You just scroll just a little bit, and then it actually just says subscribe. They make it easy for you. You click that, and then you click the little thumb up thing, the like button. Simple. There's a bell. Hit that too, and then you'll never miss an episode. You'll always know when the Nonprofits comes on. But I'll give you a tip. Sundays, 3 p.m. Central, we're right here, folks. So come and hang out with us. The live chat is always a fun time, and you can generally find the hosts hanging out there and chatting it up. So the next thing you got to do, though, real simple. You just share it. You help the subscriber count keep growing, people. You just run outside and start yelling it randomly. What? Don't do that. Okay, send the link to friends and family and on Twitter and Facebook. Okay, that's a better idea. So don't go outside and just start yelling randomly at people. But anybody out there that you think would really enjoy this content, please just shoot it out to them, because it really helps us a lot. And it really helps us with getting out there and telling more cool stories. And it helps with those fundraisers. And if you didn't know, you're about to know. Because, see, some of us out there, we have just such a difficult time traversing that whole intro knot thing, the Facebooks and the YouTubes and whatnot, but the ACA has actually made it easy for you. You should check out the Atheist Experience Network, a channel where you can find all the ACA shows in podcast form. Subscribe at tiny.cc/AEN podcast to listen to the episodes of this wonderful show, The Nonprofits, or The Atheist Experience, Secular Sexuality, Truth Wanted, and all of the awesome ACA shows. So don't miss a single episode. Go do the things. You know what to do. This is very simple, y'all. We got this. I believe in our awesome subscribers. But now is the time to go on to something that I think is pretty cool. Kelley, what do you got for us?
Well, our next story is about a person who I had never heard of before, but I now have a lot of respect for. His name is Raif Badawi. He was a blogger, and still is a blog. Well, I guess he's not a blogger anymore, but a human rights activist he still is, who co-founded a website in Saudi Arabia called Free Saudi Liberals in 2008. He formed it to create debate on religious and political issues in Saudi Arabia, and it didn't go so well for him. He was harassed. He was brought in, questioned, and he was charged with insulting Islam. He was actually in charge with apostasy, but he was able to beat that charge, and that was death penalty for him. So fortunately, he was able to beat that one. But he was sentenced to 10 years and 1,000 lashes for the insulting Islam. And the best thing about this story is he served his 10 years and he's gotten out of jail. And he seems like just an amazing person. He did not have to receive the whole 1,000 lashes, which was another good thing. He did receive 50 of them in front of a mosque too. Does anybody find it weird that they would give lashes in front of a holy building? And but there was a medical outcry about the lashings. A medical doctor found that he couldn't endure any more of it, and they suspended the rest of the lashings. So he didn't have to do that, but he did serve 10 years in prison. He was honored with the Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought in 2015. And his wife is now living in Canada, but according to his sentence, he can't leave Saudi Arabia for 10 years. So I'm hoping that maybe he gets smuggled out of the country somehow and was able to join his wife and family in Canada. So yeah, that's like I said, he's just seems such like an incredible person to me that I couldn't believe that I didn't know who he was before.
Yeah, and this is one of those stories I think for a lot of people it kind of takes us back for a second, because I mean, what did he do? He started a blog. He said some words. He said, "Oh my gosh, what about not having the religion control everything in government in our daily lives? What about we take a break, you know? Even the good Lord rested on the seventh day, right?" But that was enough to put him in jail for 10 years. I think I heard that if he ends up serving the rest of his sentence, his oldest child will be the same age that he was when he was put in prison. And that is so hard to think about, losing that much of your life for essentially what we're doing right now, less than what we're doing right now. And it really is. It's hopeful that he, you know, he was able to finally be released. I hate that it took so long. But Teo, you had some pretty good thoughts on this. What were your thoughts?
Ooh, I couldn't call them good. I'm the emo anime again, because I'm going to bring you down, guys. I don't see anything positive about this. He spent 10 years in jail. And have you heard about Mubarak Bala? He was an atheist who in 2014 was forcibly drugged and put into a sanatory. And a doctor told him, I'm quoting a doctor, "My dear, you need a God. Even in Japan, they have a God. No one should live without God. Those that do are all psychologically ill, denying the biblical account of Adam and Eve. It's delusion, denial of history." And that guy is right now in jail. only due to the sin of being an atheist. And some months ago, here in the Nonprofits, we talk about Priyanta Diwayandana, who was tortured and murdered for blasphemy, where blasphemy was doing his job of cleaning a freaking wall. So now we have this guy, Raif Badawi, whose worst, terrible, awful sin was being a blogger and a human rights activist. He was actually fighting for human rights, and he co-founded the website Free Saudi Liberals. So he was telling people, think for yourself, and that was enough to put him a decade in jail for the terrible, terrible crime of encouraging people to think. Do I have the quoting of the how is it called? Yeah, the crime was violating Islamic values and propagating liberal thought. Propagating liberal thought. Thanks to that, he was in prison for 10 years. He got 1,000 lashes, a fine of 1 million rials. That is like $266,000, sorry. And he's banned from any type of media work or foreign travel for 10 years after his release. So now he cannot leave the country. He cannot go back to being a blogger. And all because of the terrible crime. I'm very upset. I don't know if you can notice, for the terrible crime of telling people, hey, you're able to think for yourselves. You can do it. You're not alone. Apparently they are, because if you do that, you go to jail for a whole decade.
Yeah.
And that upsets me a lot.
And I think you're right to be upset. And Genevieve, I'll throw it over to you because there were some spicy things you had said that I think are really, really important and powerful. So what were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm relieved that he has been released, of course, but Teo's absolutely right that there's nothing good about this story. I think that it's important to remember that there are a lot of countries where just being an atheist or just dissenting against the government is punishable by death or 10 years in prison. Um, you know, I've always had a lot of thoughts about Saudi Arabia because they have committed many atrocities that we have tended to go a little light on because they do have money and oil. But most recently, last week, I was reading an article about how Saudi Arabia was criticizing the West for, joining up in arms and fighting for the freedom of Ukraine and remaining silent on conflicts in the Middle East. Never mind the fact that we have been directly involved in many of those conflicts. But it was particularly funny coming from Saudi Arabia because I think that they don't really understand why exactly people are so upset about what is going on in Ukraine. And it absolutely has to do with a delusional authoritarian dictator invading a sovereign nation and a sovereign people and trying to bend them to his will. Um, and he's doing the same to the soldiers that he's sending out to the front lines who aren't even aware of necessarily what they're walking into. Um, and so at the end of the day, Saudi Arabia, a country that can take a young blogger who is just saying, hey, everybody, maybe we can share some different opinions and different ideas. We don't have to stick with the status quo. If they can send somebody like that to prison with 1,000 lashings, they have no room to talk because I don't think that they want all of us to put them under the microscope the same way that everybody in the news is doing to Vladimir Putin at this moment.
And I will say it undeniably was in large part due to the uproar that was made online by a lot of people around the world that he was able to be spared the 950 lashes that were on the table for him. He was given 50 and they commuted the rest, but even 50 is too much for me. Even one for something like this, for anything. I don't know what could possibly warrant that type of behavior from any government worldwide. But Kelley, I want to ask you this. I've heard some people say, kind of something in the vein of, well, this isn't this isn't your home, Rarity. You don't live here. You don't know what it's like to be in Saudi Arabia. You don't understand our government. Do you think that's a reasonable argument? Do you think it's fair that maybe I just grew up in a place and a background that just I wouldn't understand this, or do you think it's something else?
I think it's pretty easy to understand and recognize a repressive government or a repressive regime or society when you see one, and this is definitely one. I don't think I think we can all understand that anywhere we are in the world. So I don't think we have to be from Saudi Arabia to see that this is wrong. That this is just wrong. People should be able to speak their mind. We should be able to have a freedom of religion. This guy almost was killed for joining a Facebook group, for crying out loud. That is wrong. Any way you look at it, you don't need to live in Saudi Arabia to understand that.
Yeah. Teo, what do you think?
Oh, for me, the laws in those countries are disgusting. They are disgusting laws, and it's awful that they exist. And whenever I talk about how worried I am about the USA and how religious people, not even religious people, religious extremists are taking the power over there, I am worried about you guys because I feel that those extremists, the specific group, they want the USA to be a Sharia Christian country, Sharia law Christian country. They want to have kind of the same behavior that they have over there, where we atheists cannot speak freely. So only their religion matters, and whatever their religion says matters. And for real, that scares me and that worries me a lot because, yeah, I mean, they are going to come for the atheists, and I've seen many comments saying, "Oh yeah, you know what?" Once I saw people saying, "Oh yeah, atheists don't believe in God. We should kill them so they meet the God and they start believing." And when you see that type of toxic behavior online, and those are the same people who vote and choose candidates, and they start supporting candidates who support very extreme religious laws, that is when I get very, very concerned about things going up over there. And I am concerned because as soon as something interesting happens over there, South America tries to copy that. And I don't like that either.
There's an
So
echo across the Atlantic, you're saying.
Yep. And
Yeah.
it's terrible.
Well, Genevieve, I'm gonna put all this on you. What the heck do we do about it? how do we push back against this type of stuff? Not only in our country in the United States, but in South America, in the Middle East, in Africa, in Europe. What do we do?
Gosh, well, I didn't know that I'd be tasked with
You
with
got to fix
with
the whole
with fix,
world. Yeah.
yeah, saving the world, but it's going to be a little bit of a long-winded answer. But you said something to Kelley earlier that I do want to touch on, which is sort of the United States, or the West in general, has a really bad track record of going into different nations with different cultures and saying, we know what's best, we're going to come in and fix everything. And that's often completely ignorant, both culturally and economically, etc. But we can all recognize that Raif Badawi is part of that culture. You can't just go with what the majority says and then just say, oh, we can't touch that because we want to be culturally respectful. you know we have to push back on this idea that your religious beliefs, whatever they are, make you a good person, or a better person than anybody else around you. We need to have more mutual respect for, I would say, believers and non-believers. I'm sure that I get plenty of pushback in the atheist community from time to time because I have friends who are Christian, or I have friends who are, practicing Muslims. And even though I think that a secular worldview is, I wouldn't say, the right one, but at least, approaching everything around you with a bit of skepticism and logic and doing away the fairy tales is always a good thing. But at the end of the day, I don't want to alienate my friends, and I don't want to create a culture of hostility where you know this is the way that people behave, and they become tyrannical. I think that what do we do about Christian nationalism in the United States? Gosh, I will be, put my email in the chat because I would love to hear everybody's thoughts of what we do for this
Yeah.
clusterfuck. And sorry, pardon my French. But as far as what we do with Saudi Arabia, let's stop buying their oil. Let's get some renewable energy, and let's actually put some sanctions on them until they, begin to respect human rights.
Yeah, definitely some good thoughts. Kelley, any thoughts on what those of us here, just a totally separate continent, just completely halfway across the world, any way we can lend support or kind of push back against some of this stuff?
It's hard to say. Again, I don't know how to change the world, and one of the things that I've noticed in my many years of being on the earth is that things, while they tend to change for the better, it doesn't happen very quick, and in some ways that's a good thing. But I don't think we're going to solve this problem. The point is, we're not going to solve this problem overnight, but we do need to be conscious of what's happening in other countries. And, a trade embargo is a really good idea. That's what we did to end apartheid in South Africa. So, I mean, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
It's worked before to make human rights better, so I'm with Genevieve. Let's do a trade embargo.
Teo, are you signing off on this too? I don't know if any of us here actually have the power to enact it. But what do you think? Maybe a little adjustment in some international relations for some countries out there that seemingly violate human rights left and right, whether it's on the Asian continent, whether it's on the African continent, or anywhere else.
Oh, sadly, I think that money controls everything. So as long as they have money and there are companies and there are rich people who get money from them, you are not going to be able to do that. I think that the solution is education, helping other people, our type of activism, and trying to prove and to show the world that, hey, there are people suffering because of this. There are things that you don't see that they are bad things that we have to change. And sadly, I feel that the best way to change the world is going very, very slowly, changing one generation at a time, helping one person at a time, and trying to educate others. Promoting positive atheism, so we are not seeing as monsters who have to be killed so they can see God. Teaching people about the harms of religion so they don't see, oh, God can do whatever he wants because he created us. And talking about these type of issues so people don't say, oh, atheists are they want to feel threatened but they are the bullies. No, guys, atheists are being murdered and put in jail for daring to speak freely about thinking, not even blasphemy, just for daring to say, people, you have the right to think on your own. And that's terrible. I think I guess atheists in those countries sadly should keep quiet for now, but we should do all the talking for them while we can. And we should do a lot, because if things don't change, we may not be able to do that in future, and we may be one day in the same circumstances that poor Raif Badawi is right now.
Yeah. And I'll say one last thing, and I'll toss it to you, Genevieve, to take us out. But yeah, I think it's really worth remembering, and I think we all kind of touched on it a little bit, but he's out of prison, and that's great. But he is not allowed to leave the country. His prison just got bigger, folks. And every single day, his wife and his children and all of the people that are working to help his situation, to make sure that he is safe, all of those people are walking on eggshells, because at any point in time, he could be picked up. And then he will just be back in prison. And that's not a good situation. That's not a good situation. Yes, he is out of jail. Yes. But is it much better? Is he really free if he can't he can't speak up, if he can't say to somebody, hey, I don't believe in Allah, or hey, I'm not a Christian, is that really much better? I don't know. It is definitely a hard one to know, but I think, yeah, education and continuing to speak on things, that really does help a lot. Genevieve, you want to wrap us up?
Well, I think you just did a beautiful job. But I will definitely echo what Teo said. I know that there's a lot of people out there who are not facing thousands of lashings or 10 years in prisons for speaking up about your beliefs, but I would encourage anybody who, maybe is underage or living with, religious parents, or in a somewhat hostile community. While yes, it is a very brave and so courageous of Raif Badawi to speak up, and yes, he is absolutely a hero. Anybody out there who similarly feels unsafe because of your lack of religious beliefs, I would encourage you to do what you can to protect yourself first and foremost, and don't become a martyr. Just do what you can to get out, and I hope that Raif Badawi can also get out and be reunited with his wife in Canada.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful wrap up. And I think I need a break. Can we take a break, folks? We're gonna take a little bit of a break, because if you were lazy out there and you didn't tune in to the other ACA shows last week, check out what you missed.
This is so much more fun than the atheist experience. No one has yelled at me yet.
Right?
Do that. This is so pleasant.
Yeah, we've been talking about brains and porn, which are really like two of my favorite things. So we're in great shape.
Show.
So I believe that good arguments are like IKEA or Legos, that you can give me the pieces and the instructions and I can put them together for myself. Let's start by defining it. You tell me what critical race theory is and tell me how that is inherently causing people to become racist, please.
That no single church can afford that $100 million.
I just see it like a kind of thing like buy a Jesus, get your salvation for free.
Like, nice to speak to you, Kenneth, and I'm sorry, I've forgotten the other fellow's name.
Depending on what show, some people call me Giant Mike, I've gotten, and J Mike, and all sorts of things. So
they call him on his OnlyFans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
They're officially recognized as haunted venues. They're called haunted.
Yes, they're officially recognized by batshit crazy people who are fans of haunted houses, just like gods are officially recognized by their devotees. I don't care whether something's officially recognized. I care whether or not there's actual evidence for it.
And we are back. For the next article, we are going to come over to my neck of the woods down here in Tennessee. So we've got a fun little study that was done, and it has to do with kind of, how people in the United States feel about this whole Christ fella. I don't know if y'all are familiar with this person or not. But apparently, there was a study done by Global Ipsos Research Company for the Episcopal Church. And a lot of the questions focused on some things like, how religious are you? Or how religious are the people around you? Or, what kind of political stances do you take? Or, what do you think about education? But in the process, they also ask some questions about, like, what characteristics do you associate with Christians in general? They asked questions about, what do you think the central message of what Jesus had to say was? Do you think Jesus was an important spiritual figure? And I don't want to go through all of this, because I saw Kelley had some really good stuff to say on this. Kelley, what'd you think of this study? Did you think there was any value to it, or is it just people kind of spinning their wheels?
No, there was lots of numbers in this story, that's for sure. I've covered other stories by this author in the past on a different feature, but he is a theist. I mean, his ultimate goal is to bring people into the church, so he has that going for him. And so there's that bias that is in the article, but he does at least show some understanding of why the churches are bleeding worshipers and a willingness to try to change that, which I think is a good thing. If we start to get rid of some of that toxic edge off Christianity. There were a few things in the study I found very interesting, and one was the 24% drop in people that thought religion was a force for good in just 1 year. I mean, that's a huge shift in 1 year. And it makes me wonder what happened in that 1 year that made that shift happen. And I can only think that it was January 6th with all the Christian nationalists there and all the Christian symbolism that was present at that horrible thing that happened. And I think it turned a lot of people off. It was one of the things that really stood out to me as I was watching it, and I realized I'm looking at it through kind of a tainted lens because of my feelings about religion. But when I see data like this, it kind of tells me that I might be right about that, right? There was a quote from Ryan Berg, who was a minister that was interviewed for the article, and he said, if non-religious people are turned off by what they see as the stricter faith of many Christians, evangelicals in particular, then wouldn't it make sense for them to seek more flexible alternatives? Which is true. But his solution is to make a more liberal church. And I don't think it shows this disconnect. But the problem is people aren't turning away from the church. They're turning away from faith completely. They're becoming atheists. They're becoming agnostics. They're becoming the non-affiliated, right? And that's a really good thing for us. But I don't think that if they want to get the pews full again, they're not a pool hall, that they should kind of take that into account. They're not trying to appeal to the people who aren't believing anymore, the people that are leaving the church. They need to appeal to people in these toxic churches and bring them in and show them that there's a kinder, gentler way to be a Christian.
I gotta say, Kelley, I might go back to church if there were pool tables or air hockey. But
yeah, right.
Teo, what do you think on this?
I think I will start by referring to the same thing that Kelley said about this idea of a different church or a more flexible church, because they mentioned one church that whose name I have heard once before, and that is the Episcopalians. I remember hearing about them in the Atheist Experience some time ago, and apparently they are kind of the most liberal type of church out there, because they try to, be like in peace with everybody, and that important thing is what the love thy neighbor thing that Jesus teaches, because I personally feel that is a little bit better than what the regular churches in the USA offer. For example, according to this article, which I think it was very interesting, I'm going to refer to the characteristics of the Christians in general, because Hypocritical was 55% of the results for them, Judgemental 54%, self-righteous 50%, and then we had arrogant, unforgiving, and disrespectful. And this is what I see online. This is the type of people that always who show that there is no love like Christian hate. And I don't want to believe that this is everybody out there. I guess this is just a small part of extremist religious fanatics, maybe. But sadly, we all feel that they are the representation of their religions, not only because they are actually following and quoting the Bible. And heck, you see what they are quoting, and they are right to behave in that way. It's their own religion, the one that says that you should hate anyone who believes in other gods. You should kill them. You should kill us atheists. You should kill homosexuals. You should kill people wearing tattoos, especially those guys who write tattoos of Bible proverbs on their arms. And this stereotype sadly is so common that I have seen several times this meme of Jesus where he's preaching to be racist, xenophobic, and deny help to others, because that's the way that Jesus behaves according to these people who I think that they actually believe in the Bible more than in Jesus because their behavior is awful, terrible. And this article demonstrates it. It shows that people realizes how arrogant and forgiven, hypocritical and judgmental these religious extremists are. Once again, I don't want to say that all Christians are like that. I'm just saying that people who shout the loudest, they seem to represent most religions, and they behave in that way. And I really hope that they are just a minority inside church and not the common denominator amongst them all.
Well, I did think it was interesting that it said 48% of mainline Protestants agreed with the statement repent and believe when asked, basically what was Jesus's main message. That seems problematic to me. That message doesn't seem like the loving, happy, friendly, Jesus that I think often is portrayed out there. Another part of it, though, it had to do with the perceived judgment and persecution by many of these Christians polled. Genevieve, you had some stuff on that. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of figures in this poll and in this article, but the one that I found very troubling, or just little curious, was the statement that conservative Christians feel judged for sharing their conservative views. And that was 45% of evangelicals, 40% of non-evangelical Christians. Republicans are more likely to agree with this, of course, than Democrats. And I thought that was really interesting because it feels like they're just sort of missing the mark. When we're talking about what modern conservatism is, when they're talking about these conservative views, what can we sort of, extrapolate? What might they be talking about? It seems like they're talking less about, oh, small government and low taxes. Lately, the news has been, well, the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida, or the ridiculous abortion laws in Texas and many other states, the anti-trans laws. My gosh. And so yes, I'm sure they feel judged, but they should rightfully be judged because that's blatantly disrespectful of human rights. I mean, I can only think that the right thing to do would be to judge them. And Kelley, I'm so glad that you brought up, what happened on January 6th, because can we talk about the irony of having churches, or having crosses, I'm sorry, being carried into a building that you're forcibly entering and breaking into, while there's also a gallows set up outside with a noose. Did they not see the irony of that? Of
Yeah.
oh, Jesus was sacrificed on the cross, but here we've got this to sacrifice these other guys, It's
Yeah.
it's a madhouse. It's a mad world.
So Kelley, what do you think about it? I kind of got the feeling that this survey was done not really in a way to say how do we be better necessarily, but more kind of in a way of how do we reach back to those lost sheep? Kind of how do we as the Episcopal Church kind of soften up just enough to bring back some of these people that have left. Do you think that's the right move for the Episcopal Church or any other church, or do you think that's prolonging the problem?
It is probably just prolonging the problem in the long run, right? Because we are becoming a more secular society more and more as time goes on. So it is probably just prolonging that problem. But on the other hand, as I mentioned before, if they can pull people out of these more toxic, far right evangelical churches, that can only be a better thing, right? It can only make our society better if we can get people to stop thinking about these really far right ideals and having the idea that they have to impose them on everybody else. So in the long run, yeah, it's probably just prolonging the whole problem of religion that we have with our society. But it's also, what's the phrase I'm looking for? It's also blunting the sword, I guess. Right. And so and in that respect, I'm all for it. If they can keep blunting the sword while we're chipping away from the other side, Great.
Teo, what do you think? Are you hopeful about this? We got to get through one of these that you are hopeful about. So what do you think here?
Am I going to be hopeful about something talking about how many Christians still are a majority over there, and seeing how you have those laws that we made follow? I'm still worried. Did you check the thing about do they believe that Jesus said that you should feed the hungry? Only 55% of mainliners, I have no idea who are those, said that yes, and 60% of evangelicals. That's almost like half of people. The rest are those guys who say, "Oh no, they are poor because they want to be poor, so we shouldn't do anything about them." For me, it's worrying. I'm sorry, emo guy today, but the numbers are interesting. But when you see how prominent some certain specific numbers are, I'm worried that you guys are going to keep becoming more and more religious, and that here in LATAM we're going to start following your example. And here, when we follow the example, as we saw in Brazil with the soccer religious team, we replicate the problem or the trend, and make it even stronger. So I have my reasons to be worried about all of this.
Now, Genevieve, help me out here, because 80% of evangelicals agreed, love your neighbor. 70% of evangelicals agreed, love your enemies. Isn't that enough? Isn't that enough? Or is there more that could be done?
Well, I don't really think that's enough, of course, because if you look around in practice, they're not really doing that, or at least not to the standards that we would sort of hold them to. When I was living in the Bible Belt and having extensive conversations with many of these evangelicals, I asked, why are you being so hateful to people who are part of the LGBTQ community? And for them, what love means is by being honest. And to them, honesty means you're going to burn in hell. And I'm just telling you this because I love you and I want you to repent and believe. So I don't entirely know how hopeful I am on that front with them, but I will also sort of echo Kelley's sentiments again, which is that this is coming from the Episcopalian Church, which I've been to a few services at Episcopalian churches, and for the most part, they seem to be mostly using the Bible to tell their congregation, hey, this is how you should individually be a better person. They're not the same as those Southern Baptist mega churches who are telling everybody you should vote for Trump and this is why. It's not so much about externally changing the world in the way that they see fit. It's more about that sort of like internal growth. And I think that while the world would be a much better place if we didn't have religion, I mean, think about how many, oh gosh, how many wars and deaths and suffering could be prevented. That's not realistic. And if we could get, those like hardcore fundamentalist evangelical white American Christians to come over to a nicer brand of Christianity, yes. Is it prolonging the problem? I'm sure. But is it a better alternative when we have people whose rights are literally being stripped every single day? Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think you did a good job of just kind of showing, both sides of that, because yeah, I think I think for pretty much all of the wonderful people out there watching us or listening to us right now, they're all probably nodding their heads in agreement and saying like, yeah, heck yeah, like the fewer people out there that are worried about this, and more importantly, the fewer people out there that are actively trying to overturn systems of government to fit these ideologies and push their narratives. If we can make that one less person by the end of the week, the end of the year, that is progress for sure. But I thought it was really great how everybody here has still, kind of highlighted some of the really toxic aspects of some of these religions still. The quote that I thought really, really hit home for me was Father Kendall Harmon, a popular Anglican blogger, it says. He said, If the purpose of the study was to spotlight, quote, a Jesus who comforts the afflicted, but not one who afflicts the comfortable, then there is a problem. And I don't know, that statement just really hit me hard because it kind of just feels gross. It kind of just feels like the whole point of what he's saying at the end of the day is to make people feel bad, to make people feel like they're not able to do things on their own. They're not able to achieve, greatness without giving praise constantly to some deity of some kind. And yeah, that definitely didn't leave a great taste in my mouth, but I am trying a new Kool-Aid lately, so it could be that too. But Teo, any other thoughts on this or?
I was going to say something and I totally forgot what it was. So let me think if I can catch that.
We'll
thought
come back
again.
around.
Yeah, I did. No, about the Episcopalian, I really, really hope that they, if we have to live with our kind of religion, please let it be the Episcopalian. Because before this, I was recording for other thing, and we were talking about hate preachers, and boy, are there people who are full of hate, who are talking to people who are listening to them, and sadly hate grows and grows. So when these guys say stuff like, oh yeah, those people marching for their rights, how I feel so excited when trucks accidentally ran them over, and yeah, I know that some of them have died, but according to the Bible all of them should die, so I don't care how they die. And they wish that other people suffer and die just because their Bible says so, and they become the representatives. They become the 50, how much it was? Yeah, 50% who are judgmental, hypocritical, self-righteous, arrogant, unforgiving, etc., etc., etc. When they become the majority is when you are on that road to the Christian country with a Sharia law, but in the Christian version. And I guess that is what we all are trying to fight by doing our activism and by educating people. So I have to say, if we have to support somebody, some religion, Episcopalians, please don't mess this up for you, because you are the ones I would trust at least, or I would prefer. I wouldn't even trust them, but I would prefer them.
I think that was a pretty good wrap up. Genevieve, we got one pretty interesting article left. What is this about?
So, I don't know if y'all know, but last week the 2022 World Happiness Report was released. And with the exception of one nation, 9 out of 10 of the happiest nations on Earth are also the most secular. That top 10 list includes number 1 was Finland, followed by Denmark, Iceland, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, Sweden, Norway, Israel being the outlier, and then number 10 New Zealand. And this was really interesting. There's a lot of various reasons why this could be the case. And if you want to check out the World Happiness Report, I greatly encourage you to, but it is 158 pages, so I regret to say that I haven't read it in its entirety, but it was very thorough. They looked at, economics and psychology, even biology and genetics, all of these various factors that contribute to this is something that is fairly subjective, but time and time again, it is these Nordic nations that seem to be the happiest. Um, I would love to hear all of your thoughts on why you think this might be the case. Because once again, like I said, there are so many different reasons that sort of go into this, but it is very nice to see.
Kelley, what you think?
I have some misgivings about this because I don't know that there's a causation with this correlation, right? I want to think that there is. I really, really want to. So I started looking for some data going back a couple of decades or more than a couple of decades ago. And unfortunately, I couldn't find any data that was collected on the subject farther back than 2012. So again, I couldn't make this distinction if there was this causation to the correlation. I hope there is. I so hope there is. And the fact that we're collecting data now we'll maybe be able to get an answer to that in 10 or 20 years. But if we can find that causation, it means two positive things. Number one, for us, it would be a great boost to atheism as a talking point. Hey, you become an atheist and be statistically happier than everyone else. I mean, how is that not a great recruitment slogan, right? And the other thing is we need to understand why these people are happier, right? Because if we could figure out what's making them happier, maybe we can start doing that everywhere to make everybody happier. And I think that would probably be more important than the talking point for atheists, is to make everybody happier. I know where I live, people could really use that. They could really, really use that.
Yeah. And I think that was a good point that you brought up about, there does seem to be a correlation, but this study definitely does not say that, hey, as a country becomes more secular, it is guaranteed to become, happier, and all of a sudden everybody is calm and having, peace and all that stuff. But I think it really does put a death nail in the coffin of that saying, a nation has to be religious or it just devolves into chaos. This clearly isn't true. All of these countries that are very, very high up there have lots and lots of things that, I mean, understandably so. Look, I can tell you guys right now, the potholes in my area are really rough. They are big, and you hit them going like 60 or 70 miles an hour on the highway, and it just ruins your whole day. If we're putting more focus as a nation and as a government into the here and now, it isn't that gonna make our lives better? Isn't that gonna make us happier in the long run, in the whole country? Teo, what did you think about all this?
I think that, well, as soon as I saw this article, my first thought was, oh guys, can you believe that countries where people like the one we were just talking about are not there, are less unhappier? Can you believe it? I think there are several reasons. Free choice, that is one of the biggest reasons, but the whole culture is different. As they don't have all this ideological system, they don't have to fight against religion. They can focus on important things, as what you mentioned, secular. Over there is less corruption because people don't just believe, oh no, this guy is religious, he's going to do a good job and not still. No, they actually check that everything is working properly. So politicians, if they are criminals, they go to jail. Also, their jails are based on trying to make people people who are useful in society, not to punish people. A jail over there is more comfortable than my apartment, which, I wish I could commit a crime over there, or maybe get a house. Yeah, that would be better, right? So those places, probably. Those places that actually worry about their people, that try to do things right, and that they are not thinking, oh no, there is a guy that is watching over us, and we have to enforce religious laws over other people. They have a lot of things that they don't have to deal with. So they can focus on the important stuff: infrastructure, education, the ending corruption, and over there you have to pay a lot of taxes, but those taxes actually work. You have free quotation mark education, free medical treatments, because you pay them with your taxes, and everybody does it. And it's not a real paradise, but it's very close to a wonderful place, and that's the reason why those nations are in the top 10 of the happiest places ever. I have spent my whole life trying to get there, and I will keep spending the rest of my life trying to get there, because those places seem to be awesome.
Now, Genevieve, I've heard some people say that the only reason that we have the type of safe and secure government, that the well protected and functioning nation, is because of religion in the past. I've heard people say that the only way that we settled down and had that great, explosion in the Renaissance and the Enlightenment was because of religion. What do you think about that? Do you think that's valid, or do you think there are some flaws with that?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that throughout the course of human history, religion has played a very important role, and I think it's really why religion exists and why there are religions across so many cultures. And that's because societies thrive when there is a shared mythology of some kind that you can all agree on. Um, a modern example is that, we believe that money has value. That's not something that's inherent. That's not a universal law. That is a shared mythology that we have to sort of keep everybody connected and keep society functioning. Religion was great at doing that. If you could all believe that you had the same origin story, that you all sort of, prayed together to the same God, and we was looking out for all of you, then yeah, that served a purpose. I don't know if I would go so far as to say that it had a huge role in the Renaissance, or if the Renaissance would not have happened, without the Catholic Church, for example. Um, but I think that my sort of guess about these secular nations is that they are united by a different shared mythology, or shared core value. And that is, hey, we should have a government that serves the people and makes sure that everybody is taken care of, and we should focus on their well being. I actually, a few years ago, I read a study, and in preparation for this episode, I tried my hardest to find it, and if I do, I'll put it in the comments eventually. But I learned that religious beliefs tend to decline in communities that have strong social safety nets and stability. So even though I think we're right to say that, correlation does not mean causation, we can sort of directly see how all of these things are still intertwined. If you have a lot of stability, if you have strong social safety nets, if you're not worried about living paycheck to paycheck, or if you're going to go bankrupt paying for your cancer treatment, then you're probably not going to be in that foxhole that people say are no atheists.
Yeah. I think that was an absolutely wonderful bow tied up on the end of it. And before we go, folks, look, we've had fun today. We've had some things that, maybe bummed us out a little bit, but we still had some good stuff in there too. And if you had fun and you want to hang out with us, you should check out some of the fan social media discords. You can find most of us and most of the other nonprofit hosts on the atheist community of Discord just by going to tiny.cc/ACD Discord. And you can even go over on Facebook at tiny.cc/FBNP. And if you would like to support this show, you can do so just by becoming a patron over at tiny.cc/PatreonNP. And if you happen to be already shopping at Amazon, you can support the atheist community of Austin by shopping at smile.amazon.com and simply selecting the atheist community of Austin as the beneficiary. Be sure to use the link to help out the ACA because every little bit really does help. And finally, we really value your feedback. If you're out there and you think, wow, gosh, they got some stuff wrong, or, oh my goodness, why don't they talk about this more? Well, it's actually pretty easy to do so. See, there's a comment section below, but we also have an email. Just hit us up at nonprofits@atheist-community.org. But any other thoughts before we head out? Kelley, you want to start us off?
Well, one of the things that Genevieve really mentioned it with our last story is that there were other factors that are involved with happiness, and like having a social safety net. So I want to make sure that everybody realizes that that is also a big factor. So it's not just the secularism. It's also making social changes that we really need to make all around the world to help bring people up. You can't pull yourself up by the bootstraps if you don't have a pair of boots, right?
Yeah, good point. Genevieve, final thoughts?
Gosh, I mean, this has been not the happiest episode. There's been a lot of depressing things here, but I think that altogether, it is a good reminder that, you know, nobody should think that they are better than one another or should be able to impose their own beliefs on one another, especially when those beliefs are inherently unfalsifiable, like religion. I think it's so funny that in our first segment we talked about a soccer player who felt so persecuted because he couldn't deface his uniform with great saves, and then we followed that up with a blogger just by his words getting, sentenced to 1,000 lashings and 10 years in prison. I hope that when we also talk to believers, and people who do have religious beliefs and believe in God, that you should remember that being an atheist doesn't mean that you're inherently smarter than them. And I will say that I am not an atheist because it makes me happier. I just am because that's what I believe. I lack beliefs in other gods, but just be kind, be respectful, love your neighbor, and out Christian those Christians who aren't doing Christ a whole lot of service.
That's right. Teo, anything else?
Yeah, I guess I will finish with the thing about happiness we were talking about, is that I consider free of choice as one of the biggest things over there. When you are free to be yourself, wear whatever you want without being discriminated or oppressed, that helps you a lot. So I hope we all can live in communities where we can be ourselves and we can be free and live our lives in any way that we can, and that is going to make us way happier. If you haven't thought about that, people watching this, think about it. Maybe that's what you need in your life, being more you, and just being that will make you being happier. And guys, I really loved doing this with you because you all are awesome. You should know that, and I want you to remember that.
Absolutely, yeah. Teo,
Thank
Kelley,
you.
Genevieve, thank you so much. This was always it's a great time whenever we get to hang out. And for everybody out there watching and listening, thank you for hanging out with us. We were going to tell you the future, but remember, we are the nonprofits. So we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.